All right, let's dive into an idea that might just flip the script on one of the most personal spiritual practices there is, prayer. We're going to explore what it really means to know God through the very act of praying itself.
So let's start with a question. And let's be honest, we've probably all been there. Have you ever prayed and just felt like you were talking to a brick wall? You know that feeling where your words just don't seem to be going anywhere or making any kind of difference?
Yeah, if you've ever felt that, you are definitely not alone. The text we're looking at today just comes right out and says it. For a lot of people, the only way they know a prayer was heard is if the thing they asked for physically shows up in their hands. So what's really going on here? Well, according to this text, the reason prayer can feel so ineffective isn't that you're doing it wrong. Not at all. It's that we might be looking at the whole thing from the wrong angle. The problem is our perspective.
And that brings us to the big idea for today, this massive shift in thinking. What if prayer is less about the act of asking for things and more about a journey of actually knowing God?
So this perspective totally redefines prayer. The source calls it a series of dealings or transactions with God. Now, that might sound a little, commercial, but it's not like that. The currency here isn't money, it's obedience and faith. And the profit you get from the deal is an incredible knowledge of God's character. This chart really breaks it down, doesn't it? On the left, you've got the traditional way. The goal is getting the thing. Success means the thing shows up. But look at the new way on the right. The goal is completely different. It's about learning about God. The item you're praying for is just the catalyst. It's like the classroom where the learning happens. The focus shifts from the answer to the relationship. Okay, so that's the theory. But what does this actually look like in real life? To make it super concrete, the source walks us through a really simple, practical example, the journey of praying for a watch. But here's the thing. It's not really about the watch. It's about all the lessons you learn along the way. So this journey unfolds in about 5 stages. First, God might point out some kind of hindrance in your life that needs to be taken care of. Second, you have to cultivate desire. The idea is that a prayer that doesn't move your own heart isn't going to move God's. Third, you've got to actually ask. The desire inside has to become a request outside. Fourth is obedience, and this one's a biggie. If you don't listen to God, why would he listen to you? And then finally, you get to this incredible point where faith isn't something you have to work up, it's something you receive. It's a moment where God's promise just lays hold of you and you just know. Okay, so you've gone through those steps. You've received that promise, that deep inner faith that God has heard you. You'd think the journey's over, right? Well, not quite. This is where your actions actually have to change. Now, this next point is fascinating and honestly a little counterintuitive. The source warns that if you keep praying for the same thing after you've received that inner promise, you're not praying in faith anymore. You're actually praying in doubt. I mean, think about it. It's like asking a friend for a loan. If they say, yes, absolutely, I'll give it to you tomorrow, and you keep pestering them all day, it kind of shows you didn't really believe them in the first place. So this is where the work pivots. You stop asking and you start praising. You thank God for the promise that he's already made. You can even remind him of it, not out of nagging disbelief, but with total confidence, basically saying, hey, remember what you promised? Now, let's see how this actually works in the real world. The source text gives us 2 really powerful stories that show these principles in action. The first story is about a man in a serious tight spot. He needs $150 by Monday. It's Saturday, and all he has to his name is $2. So he prays. And the first dealing from God isn't a solution, it's an instruction. Wait. He was simply told to wait till Monday. I mean, he still had $2, it was only Saturday. The very first lesson was just patience. Then comes the critical test of obedience. While he's waiting, he feels this prompting to give away his last $2. His only tangible resource. He has to completely let go. And here it is, the key insight. The moment his last dollar was gone, he felt that God came in. He was no longer depending on his own resources, not even a little bit. He was depending entirely on God. The text says it was like a small cork sealing his heart had finally been removed. And the result? On Monday, a friend wired him the exact amount he needed, $150. He didn't just get the money, he learned this profound lesson in what it means to be obedient and to truly depend on God. Now, this second story demonstrates an even deeper level of this knowing. It's about a woman, Miss Barber, who had this immovable faith, even when it looked like she was about to lose everything. This story is all about the contrast. On the left, you see the external situation just getting worse and worse. The school where she ran her hostel plans to reopen, engineers are literally on the way. But on the right, look at her response. When someone asked if she'd prayed, she said there was no need. She was so confident God wanted her to have the hostel that she knew he wouldn't play with her, as she put it. Her faith was based purely on her knowledge of his character. And in the end, the school's plans fell through, and she kept the building. And this brings us to the ultimate points of this whole process. The real answer to prayer isn't the watch, or the money, or the building. It's this: getting an intimate knowledge of God's character. You come to know his temperament so well that you can anticipate how he will act, just like you would with your closest friend. So all this leaves us with a final question to think about. What if prayer is less about a transaction for stuff and more about a transaction for knowledge? What if your next prayer isn't about getting an answer, but about starting a journey to truly know the one you're praying to?